Hello, everyone. This is Common Ground Discourse. This is episode 7B. If this is your first time tuning into Common Ground for the first time, just to let you know, this is a pickup from a conversation that we're having regarding moral truth from Sam Harris's book, The Moral Landscape. As Kenneth provided in the recent episode, we found the discussion went on a little too long. So we are just picking up from that area as to make it a more manageable audio file for those who are tuning in via audio. And so without further ado, we will pick up the conversation. Do you think it would be useful, especially for the audience, if we went into the specific examples that he drew with those projects on the following page? Thanks.
Yeah,
49.
Yeah, sure.
And all I'm keeping in mind here that how can we, when you're done with that, let's try to tie that into his main argument with looking at answers in principle and answers in practice.
Right. So the way he breaks down his three projects by example, he offers, and I quote, "To see the differences between the three projects, it is best to consider specific examples rather. We can, for instance, give a plausible evolutionary account of why human societies have tended to treat women as the property of men." That's project one. It is, however, quite another thing to give a scientific account of whether, why, and to what degree human societies change for the better when they outgrow this tendency. Project two. It is yet another thing, altogether, to describe how best to change people's attitudes at this moment in history and to empower women on a global scale. Project three. So we're looking at the rights of women. Whether they are property is defined by society and its moral thinking. Whether a society is better when it no longer treats them that way, or at what point does one society bridge the gap or cross the boundary to enforce the liberty of women onto another society.
So we were going to rope it back into the projects that he gave in 1, 2, and 3. And clearly, there's value for one. Should we consider all three as we're trying to develop the science of morality?
I think you have to, because we do things because of the way we think about things. And some of the reasoning that we use to get to that action, the reasoning is as legitimate as the final outcome. When you hit something that's low-hanging fruit, like, should women be property? I will still grant, along with Harris, that societies can evolve, that if they can evolve, they can become better. But the practices we had before may not be the best, obviously. That as we grow and develop, we find new truths, and we get better at what we do, and do better at what we do, especially with each other. Issues with women. By all means, the advances we've made in feminism are tremendous. That women are no longer considered property; they're actually considered human beings, and they're equal, and they have an equal voice, and they should deserve a vote, and that kind of thing.
That's what we're trying to get to.
Yeah, we're trying to get. I know. I went on Facebook just the other day, and there's someone who's arguing against feminism with the most androcentric argument. And their thinking is what leads them to their moral conclusion that women do not allow, this kind of place, or should not. It was around the feminism day, the women's rights, the Women's Day.
I know what you were talking about.
Yeah, because and someone pointed out, there is a Men's Day, and that's in November. But it's when it just again goes to show how terribly androcentric I am, but I can't come up with the term or the holiday. But you had the women that were striking to show that you need women in the workforce, and therefore they need to be given equal pay and that kind of thing. And this person was just ranting and raving about women needing to do this, and how self-centered it was, and how it was opposite sexism, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And their moral thinking, from a psychological perspective, I realize it's a defense mechanism to do this. But if you don't understand their moral thinking, then there's no way you can do 2 or 3. in Harris's project?
Well, this is outside of the chapter we're discussing, but that even goes into assuming that there's an author for our actions. And this goes into another piece that he's worked on before, the project of free will and understanding ourselves at the level of the brain. And I think he might be predisposed to argue in this manner as a consequence of his profession, his studies, looking at everything in experience, even who we are, as a cluster of neurons that converge and fire. And scientifically, it's not inaccurate. But that being said, I know we might have to reference this here because I'd like to look at what you just said, that our moral thought is what dictates action as valuable as action is. And I know you've read the book probably as many times as I have now, but you consider the case of our justice system, right, and how we determine an action depends on the mental state of an individual. Like if we were to find out that there's a tumor in the prefrontal cortex that completely eliminates empathy and the capacity to make moral judgment in that sense. And he goes through an example. Now, again, this may or may not be low-hanging fruit. I found it to be quite complex to think about. That someone who doesn't have...
I grant you is complex.
Yeah. One who doesn't have the ability to think of it in such a way, but yet there's still a way to put a spectrum on the actions that he causes, the individual that he brings up here. And we should probably go into the examples just so the audience understands what we're talking about here. I can't really quite recall what page that was. On.
If I remember correctly, in short, you have the example of a young boy who accidentally comes across a gun.
Yeah,
and kills someone. The second one is someone who has been abused throughout his youth.
Teenager now.
He's a teenager now, been abused throughout his youth, and then decides to kill his parent.
Mm-hmm.
The third one is someone who's led a perfectly fine childhood,
mm-hmm,
and then one day randomly kills someone.
For the fun of it.
Mm-hmm. The fourth one, someone who's led a perfectly normal childhood, grows up, decides to randomly kill someone for the fun of it, and you find out in that individual that they had the tumor.
Yes. So those are the four cases. And so based off of the argument or the projects that he's put forth with 1, 2, and 3, can we say that it holds water? Is he right to say that one has nothing to do with it in cases like this? And should we then use that as a universal rule when developing a branch of science on morality, in determining what actions or what questions in principle we can answer that will move us up and down this landscape of...
Well, in that example, there are two sides of the moral issue. Mm-hmm. One is killing right. There is a death involved in each and every one of these, and the moral action of that is, no, killing is wrong. Mm-hmm. There is no justifiable reason why this person had to die. Mm-hmm. The other side of the morality, and that's the one that he's really dealing with, is the justice issue.
Yeah.
Is it retributive or restorative justice that you tackle? Mm-hmm. If it's a young boy, obviously they do not have the cognitive development yet to be fully responsible for their actions, so they should not be tried as an adult. Mm-hmm. Curious enough, when we live in a state that more and more, especially in the school where I work, as an inner city school, that's becoming more and more of an issue, when we see youth that are tried as adults for adult actions, the outcome is a terrible event. It is morally atrocious. Mm-hmm. The thinking that led to it, and this isn't even just the moral thinking, this is the cognitive development, this is the biological, mm-hmm, neurological development. That a child who still has an underdeveloped brain is being tried as one who would have a fully developed brain in their 20s. So the young adult, obviously, or the young child, shouldn't be tried the same as adult because the brain isn't the same. Then you have one who is old enough to know better, but has been morally or has been psychologically scarred their entire, which itself has created a neurological issue and is a neurological problem.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have the third one who just does it for the fun of it. You've got the fourth one who does it for the fun of it, but then you realize there's a tumor, which is creating a neurological issue.
Yeah.
And I would even argue that on the third one, where they just do it for fun and there is no tumor, there's clearly a neurological issue going on.
Yeah, and he touches base on the psychopaths and that nature.
And I think in this one, when we're looking at the justice system of retributive versus restorative justice, from a moral standpoint, and he points this out, that we stigmatize mental health. Physical health makes absolute sense. If you are diabetic and you have something with sugar, then you need to have insulin in order to maintain yourself. You're just not right. We even have commercials now that say, you're just not right. If you're hungry, here, have a Snickers. You need the chemical balance in order to make you function. And yet when it gets into the neurological, the mental health side, we tend to stigmatize and think, no, it's just your matter of effort. Have you tried being moral today? Well, obviously you didn't because you killed this person. We don't look at the neurological issues that might have led to this. Or the societal issues that have led to this and more severe issues.
Just like roping it back into the projects,
Yeah,
I think we can both agree that it certainly is valuable to contemplate your moral actions and how you should conduct yourself in that sense. But I think that then this goes back to cultures. There are cultures that think that it is perfectly fine to have blood feuds.
Right.
Granted, they're not the majority of the world, thankfully, but what is it that can just make me say thankfully that it's not? Who are we to determine whether or not blood feuds are good or bad? And that goes into our thinking. So I think, does it then falsify all of his work to not consider that step as a project? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think it falsifies all of his work. I'm not willing to throw the baby out with the proverbial bathwater at this point. My issue with Harris and his project right now is, while it's laudable, I mean, it would be amazing if we could have a moral scale, a moral compass, if you will, that is completely detached from subjectivity. It would be amazing to live in a world where I can cross borders and not be concerned as one who is a gay man, to be accepted in this society, cross a border, and then worry about getting killed. That would be fantastic. But again, for me, that feels like low-hanging fruit. Of course, from an empathetic point of view, I have to put myself in that other society, which hasn't been challenged with women's rights or LGBT rights. An entire society that hasn't been forced to think and move beyond this because they've accepted it as is. And empathetically to appreciate that that is where that society is. Do I think it's right? No. But that's also not a moral dilemma. My issue with Harris is that he's not dealing with the gray area of dilemmas. He's not dealing with everyday little pieces of morality. Do I cut this person off? I mean, as pedantic as that is. He deals with the big issues. And I think there could be a science of morality that could be used, let's say, for universal rights. But the way he goes about it, I think, is leading to a slippery slope that would allow for globalism, that would allow for cultural homogeny.
I don't think so. I have to disagree there, because I think we could still have cultures and yet have a science in understanding what's going to contribute towards human well-being. And I use this example in previous episodes we've had, and he uses this several times too, in considering on how you think about human nutrition. There's no one right food to eat. We're all not going to eat spaghetti every night and become healthy. There needs to be, there's diversity, and you can have diets that are completely absent of good foods that you can have. But not once do I think that he argues that there's going to be one code that we should all follow and a convergence of cultures. But there at the same time, there isn't an infinite amount of choices that we can make that contribute towards human flourishing. It is finite, and we have to be able to look at those from a factual sense, as facts derived from our values, and say yes or no. Is this something we should want? I don't want to keep going back to blood feuds. Let's use several other examples. And really, a good way to put this, and I thought it was comical, as Harris tends to be from time to time. If you think of two people, let's call them Adam and Eve. There are several ways they conduct themselves to happiness or to have a flourishing society of two. Would bashing each other's face in with a large rock be good? No, probably not. So is it more complex, or is it impossible to think of behaviors like that once we add 6.7 billion people to the mix? It just becomes more difficult because cultures are going to exist, and I don't think that's what he's arguing at all. But do you think that in developing a branch of science like this, there would be a convergence of cultures? And again, I'll go back. I don't think so. We obviously have several dietary systems that work, and several people could be healthy in that sense. I wanted to take a few quotes from the book in this passage just to kind of argue against what we're talking about now. And one of the things that he talks about that will rigging the game in moral truth, that is, that if you take scientific consensus to mean that scientific truths exist, and that scientific controversy merely signals that further work remains to be done, but think moral controversy proves there's no such thing as moral truth, while moral consensus shows that only that human beings harbor the same biases, you create a double standard. What are your thoughts on that? And that if science doesn't have a consensus, there's just more work to be done. But the moment that we see that there are some contradictories in human morality, there are biases, and that's it, and no moral truth will be done.
My issue with this is that we move from tangible to more intangible areas. If science is concerned about whether or not ether exists, for instance, a time in our history when science believed ether was there and they disagreed, so obviously things need to be further studied to get there. When there is a difference of morality, I would again point towards its moral thinking and its cultural roots. What is the reason for its difference? And if there is a fundamental difference of opinion, and maybe this is finding the distinction between deciding that eating a diet of entirely sugar is bad, to your dietary analogy, that eating a diet entirely of donuts is bad for you. Everybody can agree on that, but whether a balanced diet includes quinoa or rice, what kind of grains do you have with your vegetables and that kind of thing, offers a variety that there can be no singular best nutrition. I think that I'm just so reticent to say that one culture can overcome another in this because of the dangers of globalism. That if we have a disagreement of morality depending on the issue, then on that specific issue there is not going to be a clearly defined term. It will depend on your own bias. It will depend on your own moral thinking. For the big issues, should you kill people? I would say no. But even in that, because I remain and have been moved more towards a side of all life is sacred, and that I recognize the divinity of myself and another, I am left in in conflict with those that would see killing as necessary in a matter of defense. If someone is willing to kill you, do you kill them? Do you commit another moral wrong in order to defend what would be a moral wrong? That's the dilemma. Those are the kind of situations that I see as an issue. If you're looking at a blood feud, for instance, a blood feud is awful. A blood feud makes no sense for the well-being of conscious creatures. Do you perpetuate a blood feud? Let's say someone has come and shown up to your door and they're now going to kill you because your dad killed somebody else. Do you defend yourself because you realize the blood feud is wrong? Or, recognizing the cultural context that you're in and the limit of effect you will have on this, do you choose to sacrifice yourself so that the blood feud will finally end and that the rest of your family will not be affected by this? That's the moral dilemma where neither side is going to have a happy ending.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. Which is why it shouldn't be part of culture.
But exactly. But that's the problem. I mean, if we just reach in and wipe out this, I don't think culture's history. But and that's the thing. I think Harris's issue is that he doesn't deal with the nitty gritty of everyday life. That it falls apart when you hit the dilemma.
Well, I wonder if that's where he was trying to go with this book versus trying to just establish ground for what this would look like as we develop it. At least just getting people to contend that this is something that can exist, just like having good diets, for example. The reason why I find this, I guess we just sum up the moral truth, why I find that this might be something worth investigating or worth considering as a science or developing as a science, is because ultimately opinions will be constrained by facts of our conscious experiences, our conscious states that we go through, and when we find facts, that is what we can translate it into science. What is there to be known about the well-being of an individual, and whether or not we map that through every instance we run it through fMRI to study it. I don't think that's necessary.
Right.
I think that would be excessive spending and violates parsimony that should be valued in science. But I think we can answer these honestly. And ultimately it goes down to, again, we'll go back to answers in practice and answers in principle. We may never have an answer in practice, but that doesn't mean that an answer in principle doesn't exist. And this is where I think I might be faulted for this by him if this makes it to Sam, but maybe taking out Project 1 may have been contradictory to how he approaches our opinions or having an answer. And he uses the analogy, in the past 60 seconds, how many people were bitten by mosquitoes?
Right.
As a result, how many will contract malaria? And as a result of that, how many will die? Given the technological challenges, no scientist could give you that answer worldwide. How many were bitten by mosquitoes? But not being able to answer that, we know still, in principle, it is a numerical answer. That there is a number that exists, but just because we can't answer it doesn't mean that it's there. And so he correlates that to no answers in practice should not be confused with no answers in principle, which could deal with not just thinking, but just the factual state of affairs with morality.
Right. And perhaps I'm overextending the metaphor, and should Dr. Harris get a hold of this, my apologies for this, and correct me if I'm wrong, which I'm sure you would happily do, with all due respect. But if we can't know how many people are infected with malaria in 60 seconds, if we can't count the number of stars, if we know for a fact that we can't do it, yet that number does exist, why are we wasting our time trying to approach that number, even conceive of that number, which we can never figure out? I'd rather not figure out how many people died of malaria or have just contracted malaria in 60 seconds. What I prefer to do is recognize that people are being infected by malaria and do what I can in my limited sphere of influence in order to stop that. If that's what he's trying to say in morality, we can't figure out in practice what the ultimate morality is in principle, then we need to at least try to make some inroads in morality in the limited circles we have, then I'm fine with that. And that we make inroads in defining morality in the limited circles of influence that we have by scientific means, I will grant that. My problem is when you throw out the thinking that leads to it. Rationality, thinking, cognitive development, all of that is still science. It's psychology.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I find it weird that those projects are, or that he noted that one is irrelevant when a passion to be inquisitive to how the world works is something that is critical to conducting science, and is what frees science from just being that machine that observes data and has just analysis on things that are quantifiable. You have to have that. I think that's part of questioning. This particular chapter with moral truth, I think what he's really trying to get at, and I think we might be taking it, or I think that you might be taking it a step further than what he's just trying to argue, is that if he's going to say that there's moral truth, the opposite of that conversation is that there is no moral truth. And I think what he's trying to say is that it is not the case that there is no moral truth. Because, again, going back to our terms of what morality is, what good and evil is, or good and bad, we'll use those terms probably interchangeably, and how we are positioned on that landscape. There are things that we can point to, a finite number of things, be it then actions or our own principles, that are going to push us towards human flourishing. But why should we concern ourselves with that? I think it's because if we're going to structure a society where we want to continue to live and improve individual and societal health, this is going to play a role in our decisions, especially when we get into population ethics, which is that governs most of the important decisions that we make globally, even. So, but it's a starting framework, and I know that using something as impactful as that could be a strong arm to the argument he's trying to make, but I don't see how it makes it any less relevant. What arguments could you think of, if there are any, that would completely do away with moral truth ever existing? And I guess
an argument that would do away with moral truth ever existing would be the definition of the ultimate good. He offers the argument that it is maximizing the well-being of conscious creatures. I wonder if there is a point at which we realize that one conscious creature, or a specific group of conscious creatures, one species, if you will, of conscious creatures, is a detriment to all other conscious creatures. And this is certainly taking the lens as a far more macro view. But morality, as is defined, tends to be fairly anthropocentric. It's human-centered, and this is something that Harris even tackles, that morality necessarily a human-specific study? Can there be morality in other species, or moral acts in other species?
There seems to be, and I'll take a...
Well, and that's, I think that's what we're going to get into when we look at good and evil.
I don't want to blur the two.
But if we start taking a macroscopic view, what is the ultimate good? Maybe it's not even conscious creatures. Maybe it's just existence. What is the plants that aren't necessarily conscious? It's great that they exist. Should all conscious creatures get rid of them? Well, no, because conscious creatures need plants to survive. But what if these conscious creatures are now destroying all the plants?
Yeah.
I mean,
well, you're getting into some theological space there. I don't want to tread on that, but in
the short answer, no, I can't think of one off the top of my head that would preclude there being no moral truth. I think there can be a degree of moral truth. but my guff remains that it's not so much a moral truth as a moral action, as it were, but what is the moral thought that leads to it? I find the moral thought to be far more complex and far less black and white when we do this. The truth indicates that it's either right or wrong. Moral thought in its complexity shows that there will always remain a gray area.
I wouldn't disagree. And when we have conversations like this, and certainly we're not the only ones who do this, and even discussing making it a science, could that not itself, in the grand scheme of things, here I go, speaking theologically, in the grand scheme of things, could that be considered a form of moral thought on behalf of our species towards a moral framework that our thinking in this sense, not that I want to eliminate thinking and just provide answers for people. I think that is as equally as damaging. If there's a 726-page book of morality, follow these and you will be well.
Right.
I don't think that is the way to go, and I certainly don't think that is what Sam is putting forward here. But I think what he's saying is if you can stop and think about what will contribute towards an individual's, multiple people's society, what their well-being will look like. That is something that science can help us understand, because it does concern our values. And as I've said before, and as he says several times in this first chapter, that these values can be translated into facts. And I think that is what just piqued his curiosity, because once you understand that, and once you can see that values can be translated into facts, then you can make a science out of it.
Right.
And ultimately, maybe it just might be a drive, and I doubt it, because he seems to be more, he seems to have a better drive for it. I don't think he just wants the next Nobel Prize for creating the next best science,
Right.
Although that might be a goal for many scientists anyways. But I feel like he's got a bigger concern with this.
At the end of the day, I'd say Harris's effect, his thesis is laudable.
Mm-hmm.
I'll grant him that. And that there's a great deal of relevance, and that his premise, when in practice, not principle, but practice,
mm-hmm.
would find tremendous ground in places like the UN. When we look at a Declaration of Human Rights, he gives us grounds to say that is true, and that is real and possible, that there can be something that is universal in morality. Can we find a universal measure or grounds for every moral action, every moral thought, down to the mundane of every day? I don't think so. I think that will still remain in a degree of complexity and a gray area that can't be defined scientifically.
Yeah.
But to his credit, I think he is giving us a means for the bigger conversations that are far more impactful on global society and global health and security right now.
Yeah.
But I think we could obviously belabor this to the end of the day.
Yes, no, and I think it's wrapped up pretty much. But again, if we start to see that this conversation is going in circles, we've pretty much covered everything I can about moral truth, and I will recommend it probably 70 times before we're done with this series. That for our audience members, if you haven't read the book, I urge you to at least consider doing that. It's not expensive. It's like $8 on Amazon if you want to get it.
Yeah.
If you've got a Prime account or for Audible, it's on there. You pay your monthly dues, you get a credit, and it's great. At the very least, it's thought provoking and can have an impact on our philosophical thought, as Harris and Dennett have joined in fisticuffs in this realm here. So I think that concludes, I would say, succinctly, our thoughts on moral truth and moral science. The next episode, again, we're going to be discussing good and evil, which will be an interesting conversation. As an aside, we originally wanted to do just an episode on good and evil, and I think it's kind of perfect that it folds into this. And you made a note before we hit record here that this conversation itself might go beyond just the book, which I think is fair. And would probably give credit to the work that not only he has done, but other people as well in defining what good and evil is. So with that being said, we hope that you enjoyed what we had to discuss today. We hope that you tune in for the next 2 episodes so that you can understand the full scope of our concerns here and our opinions as well. Again, hope that you pick up the book and read it for yourself so that you can have a sense of context to the stuff that we're discussing. Be sure to like this video if you've liked it, subscribe to the channel, visit our Facebook page as well and like it there. We have several updates that come out every other week or so just to let you know what we're doing. Until next time, thanks for tuning in.
God's peace.